I was driving down this long, empty road, trees crowding both sides. The sun was setting, and I was starting to feel a bit uneasy. Then, I saw this guy standing by the side of the road, his car parked up ahead with the hood open. Seemed like he needed help. I slowed down, thinking I should offer a hand. He looked normal enough, maybe a little rough around the edges. I pulled over, rolled down the window, and asked if he needed a lift to the nearest gas station. He seemed grateful, said his car broke down, and he was running late for an important appointment. Seemed legit, so I told him to hop in. He smelled a bit funky, like old sweat and something else I couldn't place. I ignored it, figuring it was just the stress from his car trouble. He started chatting, asking about where I was headed, trying to be friendly. But something felt off, you know? His eyes kept darting around, like he was checking out the car, checking me out. I tried to stay calm, but my heart was pounding. I glanced at him now and then, trying to make small talk, but he was too focused on something else. Then, he asked if I could stop the car for a minute. Said he needed to check something in the trunk. I hesitated, but he seemed insistent, so I pulled over. As soon as I stopped, he lunged at me, trying to grab the keys from the ignition. My instincts kicked in, and I pushed him away, scrambling to lock the doors. He was shouting, banging on the windows, demanding I let him in. I hit the gas, not even looking back, heart racing like crazy. I didn't stop until I reached a gas station, where I finally caught my breath. My hands were shaking as I called the cops. They took a report, but there wasn't much they could do. I was lucky to get away. Later, I found out that this guy had a record, had done some messed up stuff in the past. I shuddered to think what could have happened if I hadn't trusted my gut and acted fast. It was a wake-up call, you know? It made me realize how easily things can go south when you least expect it. Now, I'm more cautious, always double-checking before I trust someone on the road. That encounter, it still gives me chills. We were on this road trip, me and my buddies, excited for a weekend of camping. It was getting dark when we saw this car pulled over, hazard lights blinking. Looked like a family, a man, a woman, and a kid, all standing outside the car, looking worried. We decided to stop, thought we could help. As we approached, they seemed relieved, grateful for our help. The man said their car broke down, and they needed a lift to the nearest town. They seemed harmless, stressed about being stranded with a child. We figured, why not help them out? They piled into our car, thanked us profusely. But something felt off, you know? They were too eager, too overly thankful. And the kid, he was quiet, too quiet. It made us uneasy, but we brushed it off as them being in a tough spot. The man kept giving directions, guiding us through these back roads, away from any signs of civilization. We started getting nervous, exchanging looks. The woman was silent, just staring ahead, and the kid, he was staring at us, with these eyes that felt wrong, like they were sizing us up. We asked the man where exactly we were heading, but he just said the town was a bit further, that we were close. But the more we drove, the more isolated it got. No other cars, no houses in sight, just trees and darkness. We started to panic, wondering if we made a mistake. Then, the man suddenly said he needed us to pull over. Said something about the engine acting up. We hesitated, but he insisted, so we stopped. As soon as we did, he pulled out a knife, pointing it at us, demanding our wallets, phones, everything. The woman and kid joined in, blocking the doors. We were frozen, terrified. Gave them what they wanted, hoping they'd leave us alone. But they didn't. They forced us out of the car, threatening us. We were in the middle of nowhere, helpless, surrounded by these people who seemed normal but were anything but. They tied us up, left us on the side of the road, taking our car and everything we had. We were stranded, scared out of our minds, not knowing if anyone would pass by. Hours passed before a good Samaritan found us and called for help. The cops arrived, took our statements, but the family was long gone. Turned out they had pulled off similar traps before, preying on people's kindness. It was a nightmare, something straight out of a horror movie. We were lucky to get out of there alive, but it changed us. Made us realize how dangerous the world can be, even in the most unsuspecting situations. I was driving through this empty stretch of road, feeling tired and low on gas. Then, I saw this small gas station up ahead, a flickering sign indicating it was open. Seemed like a stroke of luck, so I pulled in, relieved. There were two attendants at the station, both giving off this weird vibe. One guy was old, gruff-looking, and the other was younger, but they had this unsettling way of looking at me, like they knew something I didn't. I tried to shake it off, telling myself I was just being paranoid. I parked by the pump, got out of the car, and approached the older attendant to ask for gas. He nodded silently, taking the money without saying a word. Something felt off about him, the way his eyes darted around, not making direct contact. He handed me the change along with a bottle of water, saying it was on the house, a gesture that seemed too friendly given their demeanor. But I was thirsty, so I took it, thanking him. I opened the bottle and took a sip as I waited for the tank to fill. The water tasted weird, metallic almost, but I didn't think much of it at first. Then, my head started spinning, and my vision blurred. I stumbled back, trying to steady myself, but everything went dark real quick. When I woke up, I was in this dimly lit room, tied to a chair. My head was pounding, and my mouth felt dry. Panic set in as I realized I had no idea where I was or how I got there. I struggled against the ropes, but they were tied too tight. Footsteps approached, and the younger attendant walked in, a sinister grin on his face. He taunted me, saying they needed subjects for some messed up experiments, that I was unlucky enough to stumble into their trap. I begged and pleaded, but he just laughed, enjoying my fear. He injected something into my arm, and everything started to blur again. I drifted in and out of consciousness, unable to fight the effects of whatever drug they had given me. Time passed, and I lost track of how long I was there. Days, maybe? They would come in and out, doing who knows what to me. I was weak, scared, and hopeless. But one day, they made a mistake. The knots on my ropes loosened just enough for me to wriggle free. Adrenaline kicked in, and I bolted, stumbling through corridors, trying to find a way out. I made it to a door, pushed it open, and found myself outside, in the middle of nowhere. I ran, not looking back, not stopping until I saw a passing car. I flagged it down, a mess of fear and desperation. The driver helped me, called the cops, and got me to safety. They found the gas station, but the attendants were long gone, leaving behind this grim scene of twisted experiments and horrors. I never found out what they did to me or what their plans were. I just know I was lucky to escape. The nightmares still haunt me, that feeling of helplessness and terror. I'm more cautious now, always wary of stopping in remote places, scared that I might encounter something as chilling as that gas station ever again. I was on this road trip with my friend, just two girls excited for a weekend getaway. But then, our car broke down in the middle of nowhere. Panic set in, and we were stuck, clueless about what to do. Out of nowhere, this guy appeared, said he lived nearby and offered to help. Seemed nice enough, so we accepted. He looked normal, average guy, maybe a bit too eager to help, but we were grateful. He towed our car to his place, this secluded cabin tucked away in the woods. It was picturesque but gave me the creeps. We were hesitant, but he insisted we stay the night, said he'd fix the car in the morning. My friend trusted him, and I didn't want to make a scene, so we agreed. As night fell, things got weird. He started acting odd, asking personal questions, invading our space. He offered us drinks, but I noticed him adding something to mine when he thought I wasn't looking. Alarm bells went off, but before I could say anything, my vision started to blur, and I felt woozy. I tried to warn my friend, but it was too late. We both passed out. When I woke up, we were in this dark room, tied to chairs. Panic surged through me as I realized what was happening. The guy was there, grinning, saying something about how we were his guests now. He started talking about some messed up plan, saying we were going to be a part of it. My friend and I begged him to let us go, but he just laughed, enjoying our fear. He had this sick game planned, and we were the unwilling players. He left us alone in that room, the minutes feeling like hours. My friend was sobbing, and I was trying to stay calm, trying to find a way out. But the doors were locked, and the windows were covered. Hours passed before he came back, saying it was time to play. He had this twisted grin, like he was getting a kick out of our terror. I fought against the ropes, trying to free myself, but it was no use. He made us do these awful things, things I don't even want to think about. We were trapped, helpless, and at his mercy. I don't know how long we were there, days maybe. It felt like an eternity of fear and horror. But then, one day, he left the room unlocked. It was a mistake on his part, and I seized the opportunity. I managed to untie myself and then freed my friend. We ran, not even bothering to look back, just running for our lives. We found a road and flagged down a passing car. The driver helped us, called the cops, and got us to safety. The guy's cabin was found, but he had vanished, leaving behind this nightmare of a place. We were lucky to escape, haunted by the memories of that cabin and the horrors we endured. It's a constant reminder to never trust strangers, especially in secluded places. We were on this road trip, just my partner and me, excited to explore the country together. But something felt off from the start. I noticed this guy at a diner where we stopped for lunch, just staring at us, too intense, you know? I thought I was being paranoid, but he lingered around, watching us. Later, when we hit the road again, I caught glimpses of him in the rearview mirror. At first, I thought it was just a coincidence, someone going the same way. But he stayed behind us, no matter how many turns we took or how fast we drove. My gut twisted with unease, but I didn't want to worry my partner. We stopped at a motel for the night, hoping he'd disappear. But I saw him again, lurking in the shadows near our room. I tried to tell my partner, but they brushed it off, said I was imagining things. The next morning, we hit the road again, and so did he. My heart raced, and I couldn't shake this feeling of dread. I tried to convince my partner that something was wrong, that this guy was following us, but they didn't believe me. As the day went on, I noticed the guy getting bolder. He'd drive closer, almost tailgating us, then fall back as if he didn't want to draw attention. I was terrified, feeling like prey being stalked by a predator. I called the police, but they said there wasn't much they could do without solid evidence. I was frustrated and scared, feeling completely helpless. When we stopped at a gas station, I saw him watching us from a distance. I hurried my partner, urging them to hurry up and get back in the car. But before we could leave, he approached us, pretending like it was just a coincidence that we kept running into each other. He was friendly, too friendly. His smile felt fake, his eyes cold. He asked if we needed help with anything, offering to assist with our car. My skin crawled, and I declined, making up some excuse about being in a hurry. As we drove away, I saw him staring after us, his expression twisted, like he was angry we didn't fall for his act. My partner finally started to feel uneasy, too, asking me if I was sure about the guy following us. I nodded, feeling sick to my stomach. We stopped at a roadside diner, hoping to lose him. But he was there again, sitting alone, watching us. I whispered to my partner that we needed to leave, that something was really wrong. But before we could get up, he approached us, this time more insistent. He started talking, but it felt like he was trying to distract us. I felt a chill down my spine, sensing danger. I pulled my partner outside, trying to get away, but he followed. Then, he lunged at us, grabbing my partner's arm, trying to pull them away. My instincts kicked in, and I fought back, screaming for help. People rushed to our aid, and the guy fled, disappearing before the police arrived. We filed a report, but they couldn't find him. They said we were lucky, that he might have been planning something worse. I couldn't shake off the terror, the feeling of being hunted, of being so close to something terrible happening. We cut our trip short, heading back home, constantly looking over our shoulders. I was driving up north, just me in the open road. It was late, dead of night, and then it happened. My car sputtered and came to a complete stop. Panic hit me like a truck. I was stranded in the middle of nowhere, surrounded by darkness. I got out, popped the hood, pretending I knew what I was doing. I wasn't a car expert, but I had to try something. Nothing seemed visibly wrong. I felt this creeping unease, being alone in the silence of the night, just the sound of crickets and the distant howl of the wind. Out of nowhere, I heard footsteps, slow and deliberate, coming from the darkness. My heart pounded against my chest. I squinted, trying to make out who or what it was. A figure emerged, approaching me, this silhouette in the dim light. I tried to call out, ask if they needed help or if they had a phone. But they just stood there, this eerie silence hanging between us. It felt wrong, something about them in the dead of night, in the middle of nowhere. I backed away, nerves on edge. The figure stepped closer, and that's when I saw their face. It was a man, but his eyes, they were vacant, like there was nothing behind them. It sent a chill down my spine. He mumbled something, barely audible. I couldn't make out what he said. Fear gripped me, and I fumbled for my phone, trying to call for help. But there was no signal. Of course, in the middle of nowhere. I glanced back at the man, and he was closer now, too close. I could smell this strange odor, something off, something unsettling. I didn't know what to do, whether to run or stay put. He reached out, a hand stretched towards me. I froze, unable to move. Then, a sound, a car approaching in the distance. The headlights pierced through the darkness, and the man recoiled, disappearing into the shadows. Relief washed over me as the car stopped. It was a couple, asking if I needed help. I must have looked rattled because they insisted on giving me a lift to the nearest town. We left the spot, and I looked back, half expecting to see the man there, but there was nothing, just darkness. The couple dropped me off at a gas station, and I thanked them profusely. I couldn't shake off the encounter, that eerie feeling of being watched by someone whose intentions I couldn't decipher. I got my car fixed and made it to my destination. We were a bunch of friends on this road trip, laughing and enjoying the journey. It was getting late, and the road was deserted. Suddenly, we saw these flashing lights up ahead, looked like a police checkpoint. Seemed legit, so we slowed down, thinking it was routine. As we got closer, something felt off. The setup looked makeshift, and there was just one guy, not in a police uniform, standing by the side of the road. We hesitated, but he signaled for us to stop, so we did. He approached our car, looking all official, asking for licenses and registration. He seemed friendly, but there was this edge to his voice, something menacing. We handed over our documents, trying to play it cool. Then, things took a turn. He started asking weird questions about our belongings, our destination. It felt invasive, like he was prying into our business. I looked at my friends, and we all exchanged uneasy glances. Suddenly, he radioed someone, saying something about a code red. Panic shot through us. Before we could react, more guys emerged from the shadows, surrounding our car. They weren't cops, they were thugs. They ordered us out, guns pointed at us. Fear gripped us as they herded us to the side of the road. They rummaged through our stuff, taking whatever they pleased, laughing at our protests. It felt surreal, like a nightmare unfolding before our eyes. One of them grabbed me, demanding my phone and wallet. I complied, not wanting to provoke them. My friends were equally helpless, forced to hand over their valuables. They threatened us, saying if we tried anything funny, they'd use their guns. We were at their mercy, stranded in the middle of nowhere with these ruthless thieves. They made us lie on the ground, faces in the dirt. I felt this overwhelming sense of vulnerability, not knowing what they'd do next. We begged them to let us go, but they just laughed, enjoying our fear. They took off in our car, leaving us there, shaken and terrified. We waited, praying for someone, anyone, to pass by and help us. Eventually, a good Samaritan stopped, shocked by our state. They called the cops, and we gave our statements, but the thieves were long gone, disappearing into the night with our belongings and our sense of security. The cops said they'd investigate, but there wasn't much hope of catching them. It was a brutal wake-up call, a harsh reminder of the dangers lurking on empty roads. We were lucky to have escaped physically unharmed, but the trauma of that encounter stayed with us. We were on this family road trip, excited for some adventure. We saw this old, run-down attraction on the side of the road, a place that looked abandoned. But there was something strange about it, something that made us curious. We decided to stop, thinking it might be a quirky place to explore. The parking lot was empty, and the whole place seemed deserted. We walked towards the entrance, feeling this eerie vibe, like we were being watched. As we got closer, we noticed movement inside, shadows shifting behind the dusty windows. It gave us chills, but we brushed it off, thinking maybe it was just our imagination. The door creaked open as we pushed it, the hinges protesting loudly. The air inside was musty, stale, like no one had been there in ages. But there were signs of recent activity, half-eaten food on a table, and some scattered belongings. We explored cautiously, trying to shake off the feeling of unease. The place was filled with odd things, old artifacts, dusty mannequins, and weird paintings on the walls. It felt like stepping into a forgotten world. Then, we heard whispers, faint but unmistakable. It sent shivers down our spines. We exchanged nervous glances, trying to pinpoint where the sounds were coming from. That's when we saw them, figures lurking in the shadows. They were people, but something about them felt off, their eyes glazed and their movements erratic. It was like they were living in a different reality. We tried to leave, but they blocked our path, muttering incoherently. Panic started to set in, and we tried reasoning with them, telling them we meant no harm, that we just wanted to leave. But they didn't listen, closing in on us, their demeanor turning aggressive. We were trapped, surrounded by these unpredictable individuals in this eerie place. They herded us into a corner, demanding we stay put. They seemed disturbed, talking about some bizarre beliefs and acting as if we were intruders in their space. We tried to stay calm, not wanting to provoke them. But the atmosphere was tense, and we could feel the fear rising among us. One of them lunged at us, and chaos erupted. We scrambled, trying to defend ourselves and protect the kids. It was chaotic, a fight for survival in this surreal situation. We managed to break free, running towards the exit. But they chased after us, their shouts echoing in the empty halls. We reached the car, heartbeats pounding in our ears, and sped away, not daring to look back until we were miles away. We called the authorities, telling them what happened. They promised to investigate, but we couldn't shake off the horror of that encounter. It was like stumbling into a nightmare, a place that seemed harmless but turned out to be a den of dangerous individuals. We were on this road trip, me and my partner, enjoying the drive through the countryside. We hit a point where there was road construction, and the main route was blocked. We stopped to figure out what to do, and some locals suggested an alternate route. They said it was a longer drive but a scenic route, and we thought, why not? We trusted their advice and took the detour. The road was narrow, winding through dense woods, and the sunlight started to fade. That's when things started feeling off. The road seemed deserted, no other cars in sight, and the atmosphere turned eerie. I tried to shake it off, thinking it was just the isolated route giving me the creeps. As we drove further, the surroundings started feeling more sinister. The woods seemed too dense, almost suffocating, and the road got narrower, like it was leading us into a trap. We reached this clearing, and there was a car parked by the side. It looked abandoned, but something about it felt wrong, like a warning sign. My partner suggested turning back, but the road behind us had vanished, like it had just disappeared into the trees. Panic started to set in. I tried to keep calm, telling myself it was just a strange turn of events, but my heart was racing. We kept driving, hoping to find our way out, but the road seemed to stretch endlessly. Then, we saw them figures standing on the road ahead, blocking our path. They wore masks, faces covered, and they didn't move, just stood there staring at us. It was unsettling, this sudden blockade in the middle of nowhere. My partner tried to turn the car around, but before we could, more figures emerged from the woods, surrounding us. They banged on the windows, demanding we stop the car. Fear clenched my chest as I realized we were in trouble. I shouted, telling them to leave us alone, but they just kept pounding on the car, their voices muffled behind the masks. I felt trapped, helpless, not knowing what they wanted or how to escape. They forced us out of the car, and I could see more of them emerging from the woods, their numbers growing. They circled us, and I felt this overwhelming sense of dread. They took our belongings, demanding our wallets and phones. We complied, not wanting to provoke them. They spoke in hushed voices, discussing something amongst themselves, their masked faces unreadable. Then, they let us go, but not before warning us to never return. they vanished into the woods, leaving us shaken and stranded in the middle of nowhere. We walked for what felt like hours, trying to find a way out, but the woods seemed endless. Eventually, we found a small village and asked for help. The locals seemed wary, distant, but they called the authorities for us. The cops arrived and listened to our story, but there was little they could do. They said it was a remote area, and these things happened. It was like they didn't want to get involved. We managed to get back on track, but that encounter haunted us. The isolation, the feeling of being at the mercy of those masked figures, it was a nightmare. We couldn't explain what happened or why, but it left us scarred, always looking over our shoulders, afraid of what might be lurking in the shadows of unfamiliar roads. We were on this road trip, my sister and me, just trying to get to our destination. It was getting late, and we were driving on this deserted highway, surrounded by darkness. That's when I noticed it, a massive semi-truck behind us, headlights glaring. At first, I thought nothing of it, just a truck on the road. But then, it started tailgating us, getting uncomfortably close. I tried to maintain speed, but it stayed right on our tail, like it was chasing us. I switched lanes, hoping it would pass, but it didn't. It kept following, no matter what we did. My sister was getting scared, and I was trying to stay calm, not wanting to freak her out more. The truck driver was driving recklessly, honking incessantly, and flashing the lights. It felt like a nightmare. I couldn't see the driver's face, just the silhouette behind the wheel. We tried speeding up, slowing down, anything to lose the truck, but it matched our pace, relentless in its pursuit. Fear crept in as we realized we were alone on this deserted highway, with this ominous truck tailing us. I called the cops, telling them what was happening, but the signal was weak, and the call kept dropping. Panic surged through me as I felt this overwhelming sense of being hunted. The truck started getting more aggressive, swerving dangerously close to us, almost pushing us off the road. My hands were shaking on the wheel, and my sister was gripping the seat, terrified. I tried taking an exit, hoping to lose it, but the truck followed. It was like it was playing this twisted game of cat and mouse, determined to stay on our trail. We drove for what felt like hours, the truck never letting up. It was relentless, a dark presence on this empty highway. I was desperate, trying to think of anything to shake it off. I spotted a gas station up ahead and decided to pull in, hoping for help. But as we approached, the station was deserted, a desolate sight that sent chills down my spine. The truck pulled in behind us, blocking our only way out. My heart was racing, and I was frantically trying to figure out what to do. The driver of the truck finally stepped out, this shadowy figure looming in the darkness. I couldn't make out any features, just this imposing presence. I locked the doors, not wanting to take any chances. The figure approached, slow and deliberate. It felt like time had frozen, and I was holding my breath. Then, suddenly, the truck driver spoke, this deep, haunting voice that sent shivers down my spine. They said something about us being on their territory, a warning to never come back. I tried to reason, to explain that we were just passing through, but they didn't listen. They just got back in the truck and drove away, leaving us shaken and stranded at the deserted gas station. We waited, terrified, until a passing car stopped and helped us. We made it to the nearest town and reported what happened to the authorities. They said they'd look into it, but they didn't seem too convinced. It was like they didn't believe us, or maybe didn't want to get involved in something so strange. That encounter left us scarred, haunted by the feeling of being relentlessly pursued on that deserted highway.